Hey y'all, it's Kim. So this will be video number 4 of the Darren Indyke deposition. I know yesterday, if you watched it all the way through, it cut off on me, so I may have to just do like a 45 minutes lot. I don't know why. I think something's wrong with my computer, but I had to delete some files, so maybe that's why. And then I know I have a bunch of stuff open from the DOJ website. Hold on, this thing's going to start playing. But I know I have too much stuff. So I got to delete a few things. But let's go ahead and let this play. Like I said, we'll do 45 minutes and see if it doesn't stop while we're watching. Anyway, so here's this.
How many times did you visit Zorro Ranch?
2 or 3 times.
What were the nature of your visits to the ranch?
Usually, if I'm visiting a property, and I believe in this instance, it had to do with some kind of a construction project taking place on property. Oh, and there was one other time, now that I'm thinking about it, when my family and I took a vacation out in New Mexico. Epstein wasn't there at the time, but my family and I visited the ranch just to see it.
Did you visit the Palm Beach residence?
I did.
How many times did you visit that residence?
Well, after he was in jail, when I went to see him in jail, I actually stayed at the Palm Beach residence in one of the rooms, one of the bedrooms.
And how long did you reside at that residence?
I didn't reside at the residence. I stayed in the residence. When I would go visit him, I would go there for a day, stay overnight, and come back to New York, New Jersey.
Did you visit his residence in Paris?
I visited the residence in Paris once when I was on a family trip when he wasn't there. I think once when he was there for, I don't remember, it was a business related trip and I don't remember the nature of the business. It was quite some time ago.
Was Mr. Epstein present?
He was there, yes.
Who else was present?
Val's son is ballet, and one personal assistant, I don't remember who. But it was somebody who was his personal assistant at the time.
Recognizing that you just testified, you don't recall why you visited Paris with Mr. Epstein. Is it possible that it may have been related to meeting with Jean-Luc Brunel?
No.
And for the record, do you know Jean-Luc Brunel?
I did interact with Jean-Luc Brunel on probably a handful of occasions, yes.
What were the nature of your interactions with Mr. Brunel?
Brunel had traveled to the office one or two times. I understand that he and Epstein were social acquaintances, so when I was visiting Epstein for whatever reasons I was visiting Epstein, I would see him. As it relates to MC Squared had some kind of a payroll tax issue, if I recall. And in connection with that payroll tax issue, there was some kind of a letter of credit that was required for it. And I interacted, I think, with him and with his staff. I think he was an accountant or controller with respect to that issue and Epstein providing some security for the letter of credit.
Did you socialize with Mr. Brunel outside of?
I did not socialize with Mr. Brunel outside.
And you mentioned,
period, not outside of it. I didn't socialize with
him. You mentioned the entity, and I do not have my notes in front of me, but what was that entity?
MC Squared. MC Squared was a modeling agency. And to my knowledge was a legitimate modeling agency with bookers and employees. So that was an agency that I believe he was a principal of.
Did you have any role in organizing that modeling agency?
I recall that I did the I don't know if it was the corporation or the LLC, the incorporation work, or had something to do with the incorporation work.
What was Mr. Epstein's role with the agency?
I don't know that he had a role. I don't know that he was I'm pretty sure he wasn't a principal of NC Squared.
During the time that you knew Mr. Epstein, did he ever represent himself to be a talent scout for models?
Not in my presence, no.
Did you ever subsequently learn that he represented himself to be a Victoria's Secret model scout?
Through allegations in legal papers.
What did you think of those allegations?
I didn't know what to think.
As far as the resident or the properties that Mr. Epstein owned that you said he visited, and correct me if I'm wrong, Palm Beach, Manhattan, New Mexico, and Paris, did you have keys or security access to any of these properties?
No.
At any time, did you have office space inside any of these properties?
No.
Did you observe any massage tables?
After he died, when we did a tour of the New York, I think it was the co-executive, Rich Collin. We did a tour of that property, and I believe I saw a massage table there.
So then, just for the record, can you be clear that before he died?
Before he died, I did not see any massage tables.
You never, during your representation, were you ever a part of any purchases of massage tables or equipment?
No.
It's been reported, and we've seen from the Epstein Files Transparency Act that Mr. Epstein had weird taste in artwork, and many of his properties
He did.
Portrayed nudity. Did you notice any unusual artwork when you visited the properties?
I saw, there's the blue dress that everybody refers to in the press. I had seen that in the New York property in the control room where the security person was located. I've seen that in that room. I remember seeing eyeballs, glass eyeballs. I forget which house that was in, but it was glass eyeballs that was hung in a frame and hung up. I thought that was kind of an odd thing. I remember in the New York townhouse, when you walked in on your way to go to the dining room, there was a rope with, I think, like an acrobatic woman dangling from the rope. So that struck me as kind of an odd piece of art. He had an American flag on the dining room table at some point. I think that was art. I don't know.
Did you ever discuss any of those art choices with Mr. Epstein?
No, my relationship with Mr. Epstein was not such where I would have a conversation about artistic tastes.
Real quick, have you heard the phrase, if you can speak it, don't write it, and if you can wink it, don't speak it?
No.
Okay. It's a DC phrase people like to talk about, not good. But you get the general gist.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Epstein has a very documented history of putting things in writing that people would generally not want put in writing. It seems intentional, it seems systematic even. Have you followed that at all? Do you realize that the Epstein Transparency Act shows us all these emails and the way that he documents things really intentionally to create, it seems like he's pretty leveraged. I mean, do you have any insight into that practice?
I don't have any insight into that practice. I've never seen his emails.
Why do you think he would document so many things that the people that he was communicating with clearly probably not want that stuff in writing.
I,
Or did you ever see nude photos displayed at Mr. Epstein's properties?
I've seen in inventorying the estate, I've seen there's naked paintings, naked women in paintings. I believe there was a book of nudes, like a photographic book, one of those big kind of coffee table books. I saw something like that. I think I'm trying to remember if it's only because I heard tell of it. Claims that were owned by Mr. Epstein beneficially, yes.
How many times?
Over the course of 23 years, maybe one a year, maybe less than that, maybe a dozen. I'm not sure, but it was not frequent.
Was Mr. Epstein always present?
Uh, every trip that I went, I think he was present, with the exception of one, when I'd gone to, I'm not sure if it was DC or Boston with Mr. Epstein on it. I'm sorry. I had gone either to Boston or DC with Mr. Epstein on a day when I had told him that I was celebrating my anniversary with my wife, and he asked me to go nevertheless. And when we came back to Teterboro for that trip, he said I should take my wife to Atlantic City and take the plane. So that was the one time that I did not travel with him.
What were the nature? Was it business related? You were always traveling on his plane?
Every trip that I took with Mr. Epstein was business related on his plane.
It's been alleged that Mr. Epstein would use his plane or would conduct sex parties on his plane. You never witnessed or heard anything related to sex parties on his plane?
I never witnessed any kind of sexual conduct on his plane when I was on the plane.
We're coming to the end of our hour, so I'm going to ask you some questions to close. Have you ever declined to provide legal services for legal or ethical reasons?
No, I don't think that occasion came up.
Have you ever declined to participate in a transaction for legal or ethical reasons?
While I was employed with Epstein declined to participate in transactions that he thought were inappropriate for either legal reasons or that he thought could potentially be scams or frauds.
I don't know.
So in that respect, yes. Personally, I never had occasion to make that call.
Have you ever advised a client to not tell you something?
No.
Have you ever advised clients about human trafficking statutes?
In connection with Did I answer the question? Sorry. In connection with the legal defense team, the team and I certainly reviewed the sex trafficking statutes.
Mr. Indyke, or your lawyers, you discussed this committee's subpoena of documents of the Epstein estate last hour with the ranking member. I believe it was stated that the subpoena is closed out except for items 15 and 16 in the subpoena schedule. Is that correct?
15 has subparts A and B. So one of them is closed out and one of them.
The 4. The subpoena is addressed to the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, heir of Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn, and it was sent on August 25th of 2025. Item 15, and I will read it into the record. It requests all documents and communications to or from and or referring or relating to the following individuals. A is numbers 1 through 92 defined by Giuffre versus Maxwell. Plaintiff Virginia Giuffre's fourth revised disclosure pursuant to the federal rules of civil procedure in the Southern District of New York on January 5th of 2024. And B, all presidents and vice presidents of the United States not otherwise listed in request 10A from January 1st, 1990 through August 10th, 2019. Number 16 says all documents and communications referring or relating to the following entities: A, COUQ Foundation, B, NES LLC, C, New York Strategy Group, D, JEGE LLC, E, JEGE Inc., and F, LSJ LLC. My understanding is that the committee counsel discussed with the estate lawyers the need to further clarify items 15A and 16. I want to be very clear. The committee does not consider 15A or 16 to be closed out, as additional clarification was sought by the estate. The committee intends to provide that clarification, but is first continuing its investigation and review of materials produced by banks and DOJ, which relate to these requests and assist the committee's clarification. And again, to be clear, the estate communicated to us that item 15B is completely closed out, and the estate possesses no additional documents responsive to that request. We can go off the record.
We can go back on the record. Good afternoon, Mr. Indyke.
Good afternoon.
Are you familiar with the Florida Science Foundation?
Yes, I know the Florida Science Foundation.
Okay. Were you involved in setting it up?
The Florida Science Foundation is the Q Foundation, which was an existing foundation that predated Mr. Epstein's conviction in 2008.
Oh, cool. Nice.
So was there a separate incorporation of the entity that subsequently was known as the Florida Science Foundation, as you just explained it?
I believe that initially, I'm not sure why it was done, but one of the Florida attorneys formed a separately Florida Science Foundation. But that, I believe that one was never used. I believe the foundation that was in existence was the one that they used.
And you don't have an understanding as to why the Florida Science Foundation was incorporated?
As I'm sitting here today, I think somebody just did it quickly because they knew there was something called the Florida Science Foundation. They didn't, and I don't think that they kind of got direction from anybody and they just did it.
I can represent to you that I've seen articles of incorporation for the Florida Science Foundation that were filed on November 1st of 2007. Does that sound right to you?
Sounds about right, yes.
Okay. And that, to my chronological understanding, was after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and during his plea negotiations with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Florida. Is that right?
After November 2007 would have been after he was arrested. And what was the second part of the question?
During his plea negotiations with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I think so, yes.
To your understanding, was the foundation created, whether in whole or in part, to give Jeffrey Epstein a place to perform his work release?
I think the answer to that question is I believe that Epstein wanted work release. I believe that he wanted during his work release to do the scientific work that he was doing. He was an avid supporter of scientific research and academic research. And I believe that he wanted to continue that work if he were to get work release. And so I think in anticipation of that, though, I think it was a Florida law firm that, I think it was a Florida entity. The one that was incorporated was a Florida entity, is that right?
That is my understanding.
I believe the Florida law firm just set it up without kind of discussing that in detail. And then once the conversation ensued further, I believe that it was determined that the foundation that was already doing that kind of work, like the COUP Foundation was, should be the foundation that's doing it in Florida.
I understand that the foundation had offices at 250 Australian Avenue in West Palm Beach. Is that accurate?
That sounds right, yes.
Were you ever present in those offices?
I was in those offices. I wasn't stationed in those offices. My office was up north, but from time to time, when Epstein was on work release, and I would come down and have kind of the status conversation as to what's going on with the transactions that I've been working on. It would be at that office.
How often did that happen?
I don't recall sitting here today.
More than 10?
Is there for? Yeah, I mean that's probably true.
During any of those visits, did you see any women present in the offices?
I believe there was a personal assistant present. I don't remember which one.
Did you ever become aware of Epstein sexually abusing women in those offices?
I became aware. I'm not sure if the allegation happened after he died, but I became aware of the allegation after the fact that he did.
Did any woman ever tell you that she had been sexually abused by Epstein while he was on work release?
No.
Did any woman ever ask for your help in connection with sexual abuse by Epstein?
No. And just the idea that was taking place, I'm not saying it didn't, but it would have surprised me because when Epstein was on work release, there was a deputy sitting in the front desk. And the office wasn't that big, so that would have surprised me if that was going on.
When you say deputy, you mean law enforcement?
Like a law enforcement, a deputy sheriff.
Sorry.
Communicate with law enforcement.
Did you visit Epstein in prison in Florida?
I did.
What was the reason for those visits?
The reasons for those visits is that while he was in jail, there were 5 properties. There was construction going on properties. There were investments that were outstanding at the time. There were things going on that required me to get instruction on, me to talk to him about, to give him status updates on. That was the basis of the conversation.
You were asked by the majority earlier today about tip-off to Mr. Epstein of an FBI search. I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm just going to ask the question in a slightly different way for clarity of the record.
Okay.
Do you have any reason to believe that Epstein was tipped off about an FBI search?
I don't have a specific reason to believe that. I've heard the allegation a bunch of times. And having learned things after he died about him, I would be less certain that it didn't happen.
Do you have any knowledge of the removal of video equipment from any of Mr. Epstein's properties prior to execution of an FBI warrant?
I need to speak to you about this. Yes.
We can offer. Back on the record. Mr. Indyke, I'll repeat the question. Do you have any knowledge of the removal of any video equipment from any of Mr. Epstein's properties prior to the execution of an FBI warrant?
A video clip?
Video equipment.
No.
So my next question is, do you have any knowledge of the removal of any computer equipment from any of Mr. Epstein's properties prior to the execution of an FBI search warrant?
So just before we get to that, you're the one asking the questions, not me, but can we first ask if he has any personal knowledge, and then if you want to follow up, we can.
Just qualify the question by adding the word personal.
Well, that'd be helpful. Yeah.
Sure. So Mr. Indyke, do you have any personal knowledge of the removal of any computer equipment from any of Jeffrey Epstein's properties prior to the execution of an FBI search warrant?
We're going to talk about a waiver here.
All right. So I think he's prepared to tell you what well, that's why I asked for personal knowledge. I want to be clear about, did you have personal knowledge?
So the
or anything that could have happened?
I don't have personal knowledge of the removal of computer equipment. It wasn't part of anything like that at the time. I had no knowledge that it was done.
And by personal knowledge, you mean firsthand knowledge?
Firsthand knowledge.
Do you have knowledge from another source?
Okay, so now, if I can, I think he's happy to answer the question. It may implicate a privilege, but to the extent that it's not going to be deemed as some broader waiver of privileges, he's ready to answer the question. So unless someone's going to claim that that is a waiver of any privilege that might exist.
So I think for clarity, I'll just read for the record the minority's position as to privilege assertions today. And that is, as a general matter, Congress does not recognize common law privileges, including the attorney-client privilege. I will further note that the elements of the attorney-client privilege do not appear to be present as to the entirety of Mr. Indyke's communications with Mr. Epstein. Among other reasons, Jeffrey Epstein was a serial sexual offender and abuser. As such, many, if not most, of his communications with Mr. Indyke were utilized to further his crimes. Such communications are subject to the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. Moreover, the attorney-client privilege is, in essence, a policy choice. The minority does not believe that this policy supports maintaining any privilege that may exist with respect to a former client, such as Jeffrey Epstein, who is both deceased and perpetrated horrific crimes against numerous victims.
Okay, so look, I respect the minority's views. I think the Supreme Court differs with the minority's views on attorney-client privilege. Having said that, one, I don't believe he's going to be talking about conversations with Mr. Epstein. That's not the privilege he'd be asserting. It's in the context of joint defense communications. And as I said, he's actually prepared to give you the answer. So it's not that we're now asserting privilege over it, but I'm stating for the record, this is not, in our view, be deemed as some broader waiver of privilege, regardless of whether you may recognize privilege. If you do, then we may have a different response.
So, sorry, just so we're clear on your position, are you willing to answer, or is your client willing to answer the question on condition that we accept your premise that the privilege applies, but that his communication is not subject to it? Or just
no, I'm not asking you to accept that does or doesn't apply, because I understand your view to be it doesn't in this context. We disagree. I'm asking you whether or not the privilege applies. Are you going to take a position that if he answers this question and he does have privileges to assert, that by answering the question, he has more broadly waived any potential privilege in his communications with Mr. Epstein or anyone else on subjects related to Mr. Epstein?
I think. I'll go on record for a second, please. On record. So we have consulted with counsel for the majority, who is going to articulate the committee's position on this question.
Yeah, just to make clear, all objections are reviewed on an individualized basis, based on the assertion of privilege at a given time, and the chairman makes those determinations, the minority or even majority staff. In this situation, the chair redirect the witness to answer the question and understand the issue raised by counsel as to assert that they don't view this as a blanket waiver, and as stated, all responses from the chairman related to objections or assertions of privilege are done on an individualized basis.
Yeah. If I may ask, just to be clear, and I understand that the decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. I think the issue we're raising is whether people can say that because he answers a question in the context of the one that was asked, putting aside what people's positions are on privilege generally, that the answer to this particular question, which is a pretty limited scope question, will not be deemed by Chairman Comer or the majority to be a broader waiver with respect to attorney-client privilege that might apply to other issues.
Given that each individual issue raised is done so on an individualized basis, and in this case, the decision here is specific to the question that has been asked, and so that.
What in the hell are they even
The
talking about?
chairman will review all further objections should they be raised regarding any privilege that is asserted solely on the basis of the facts in that objection, raised in that objection, and will not hold facts related to other objections raised, including the circuits.
We go for it. Record.
Okay, so we will permit Mr. Indyke to answer the question with the understanding that we have that his answering that question will not be deemed a broader attorney-client privilege waiver with respect to other topics, even if they relate to Mr. Epstein, and on that basis, you can answer the question.
Thank you. So during the course of after Epstein's conviction, after he served jail time, through conversations with defense counsel, I became aware that there were computer hard drives in the possession of private investigators. Not having done them, not having been participated in that in any way, I don't know when they removed, when they came in their possession, if they were removed. I just don't know how they came into possession, but I knew of the existence of hard drives.
And did you come to know what was contained on those hard drives?
No.
Mr. Indyke, up until now, we've been talking about the investigation and prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein that were conducted in Florida. As you know, Mr. Epstein was subsequently investigated and prosecuted in the Southern District of New York. Were you ever contacted by the Department of Justice or the FBI in connection with that investigation?
No,
Were you ever contacted by the Department of Justice or the FBI in connection with the investigation or prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell in the Southern District of New York?
I was not personally contacted. Can't recall if the estate's counsel was contacted.
Do you have reason to believe that the estate's counsel may have been?
Sitting here today would be a guess, and I don't really want to guess. I don't recall. And I don't recall any conversations subsequent to that.
Mr. Indyke, I'm going to shift gears a bit. And as we go forward, I'm going to ask you some questions about interactions with women linked to Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
Before I do that, I'm going to request of the majority that prior to any public release of the transcript or video of today's deposition, that the names of any actual or potential Epstein survivors that appear in any of the questions I pose or any of the answers to those questions, as well as any other information in the record today from which a survivor could be identified, be fully redacted. And with that, you spoke during the previous round about.
So just so I'm clear, so I can be comfortable that if we're using the names of a potential victim, and I use the names here, that will be redacted, and I don't have to worry about.
So this is a request I'm making to the majority, which controls redactions of the transcript prior to its public release. So 301 East 66th Street.
Yeah.
There were, as I understood from your previous testimony, women connected to Jeffrey Epstein living in that building. Is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
How many?
I don't know.
Did you ever interact with those women?
Never in the building, to my recollection.
Elsewhere?
If they were in his office, yes.
And who were those women?
It's happened a while ago, and I'm having trouble recalling who lived in the building, which is why I can't answer your question about how many. I'm having trouble recalling. I think Sue Hamlin may have lived in the building, and I interacted with her when in the office, and at times when I visited at Mr. Epstein's home in New York in the dining rooms on the ground floor. I believe I saw her there and interacted with her there. I'm sorry, I believe I saw her there and interacted with her there. I'm trying to think if there are other people. I don't know. This is very hard because I don't know who's living there. And if you had names that you could give me, it would be helpful.
We can put that aside for the moment. Did Jeffrey Epstein own the apartments at 301 East 66 that these women were living in?
I'm not 100% certain about the relationship because it was a little vague. OSA Properties, Jeffrey had a relationship with OSA Properties, which owned the apartments. I think his brother was an owner of OSA Properties in some form, and I don't know if I believe, I'm not 100% certain because this is not something that I did, but I believe that the Epstein was leasing a certain number of the apartments.
Was Epstein paying rent for these women?
I believe Epstein was paying rent for the apartments.
The apartments where these women were living?
Assuming there were women living there, yes. But again, I can't tell you who was living there. I don't recall, as I said, I do recall Sue Hamlin there. I don't recall who else was living there, but I also think, because I remember there were leases for, was there, now that I'm thinking it through, was there as well. And Shuriak. And those were in apartments, but I don't know if they were leasing directly. I remember getting a copy of the lease, but I don't know who was paying for the lease.
What was your understanding as to how these women came to know Epstein?
I don't have an understanding as to how they came to know it.
Did you ever discuss that with him?
No.
Did you ever see Epstein in the building?
I'm trying to remember when I was living there, or when I was working there, Epstein didn't into the building. And when I was living there, I don't think I ever saw him in the building.
Do you know Lana Pozhidayeva?
I think that name refers to Svetlana Pozhidayeva. I do know, or did know, Svetlana Pozhidayeva.
And who is Ms. Pozhidayeva? Pozhidayeva is how I'm pronouncing it.
I believe she worked as an assistant for Mr. Epstein. I believe she was somebody who did marketing work for one of the foundations, one of the scientific foundations. I don't know of the relationship beyond that.
And what was your understanding of her relationship to Jeffrey Epstein?
What I just told you is my understanding of the relationship.
Did you ever understand it to be sexual?
No.
It's my understanding that Ms. Pozhidayeva had a business. Is that correct?
There was a woman empowerment business with that WE something or other.
The We Talks?
Yeah.
WE Talks?
Yeah, I think that's what it was about. And I believe that she was, I think that business was doing like presentations, conferences, things like that. And at some point later on, Ms. Pozhidayeva had asked me to do some trademark work for that business.
Did you do that work?
I think I did, yes.
Did she pay you for that work?
No.
Did Ms. Pozhidayeva ask you to do that work directly, or did that request come from Epstein?
She asked me to do the work directly.
What about
I know the name, and I think I know the person. I think I know that person as an assistant.
have you met her?
I believe, yes, I believe I met her probably a handful of times.
And again, did you ever understand that she was in a romantic or sexual relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
I had no understanding of any romantic or sexual relationship with Mr. Epstein.
I'm going to ask the court reporter to mark as Exhibit B, I apologize, B. A fax dated March 14th, 2019. It appears to be drawn on Jeffrey Epstein's Deutsche Bank account in the amount of $375 made payable to Women's Health of Manhattan. Mr. Indyke, have you seen this check before?
I don't specifically remember this check.
Is that your signature?
It appears to be my signature, yes.
Do you recall ever writing a check on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein to Women's Health of Manhattan?
I have no specific recollection of writing a check to Women's Health of Manhattan.
Do you have an understanding as to what Women's Health of Manhattan is?
No, other than what seems to be implied by its name.
Which is?
Some kind of a health service.
As you sit here today, do you have any recollection or understanding as to why you would have been writing this check to Women's Health of Manhattan with name appearing on the memo line?
Again, I don't have any specific recollection as to why, but I can tell you that it was not uncommon for Epstein to pay for medical visits, tuition payments for people, both men and women who worked for him, who he knew, who were acquainted with him. So a check for $375, and the likelihood that this check came to me by itself is probably very limited. The likelihood is probably in the stack of checks. If I was signing checks at that time, I would have gotten a stack of checks and there would have been something on there. And if the person that provided to me had authority to request the check, then I simply would have signed the check. So this was not a big part of my role. It was a role that I had as just as an administrative function. So that's as best I can do.
To your knowledge, were any of the payments that Jeffrey Epstein made to Women's Health of Manhattan in connection with reproductive health services?
I have no idea.
No further questions on 6.
All right, I'm gonna stop this. That was about 45 minutes. That way it doesn't shut off on me again. Because yesterday that was kind of stupid the way it did it. But anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.